Hi everyone, thanks for joining us today. My name's Sam. I'm from the MBA recruitment team, and I've got Rogan here, the MBA program director, here to talk to you today about the MBA, what's happening this year, any exciting new changes coming, and hopefully to get you excited about joining us in September. So can I quickly just see if you can hear me? Would anyone mind popping yes into the question box just so we can tell that you're listening? Yep, perfect. Thank you for that. Okay, great. We've still got a few people joining, so thank you. Give it maybe a minute or so, and then we can get started. Wonderful. A few more people just joined, so thank you for that. I think we'll get started now, and I will hand over to Ian. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. First of all, I just want to thank all of you for joining us, I guess this morning, this afternoon, or this evening, depending on where you are in the world, and congratulate you on your acceptance into our MBA program. In terms of just our sort of agenda, I'm just going to give some brief remarks or perspective on some of the things that I think make the Oxford MBA distinct. As Sam mentioned as well, just some of the things we're looking at that will be new next year. But really, this is a big opportunity for you to ask questions that hopefully I'll do my best to answer. So once I finish with my comments, you'll have a question box you can see on your screen, and certainly feel free to submit questions. You can submit them as we go, but certainly we'll have time for them as we move forward. So I guess why are we here? What is the purpose of the Oxford MBA? I think we are distinct and unique in that we very, very much care about and very much believe in the importance of developing MBA graduates who care about working with or for the private sector to not only be financially successful, which is important and that's fine, but also because we believe that the private sector has a great deal of influence in terms of shaping the institutions and the systems that govern our society at large. And therefore, we think it's dependent upon a business school at a place like the University of Oxford that, although 800 years old, with a long tradition of developing leaders, often in the private or in the public sector, having a business school that's only 21, 22 years old, but I think a reflection of where the world is headed. And in fact, leadership increasingly is needed at the CEO level and throughout the private sector in terms of tackling these world-scale challenges, world-scale problems that we need to be addressed. And to do that, and the reason why I think Oxford is the perfect place for that is that you do need a grounding in the MBA toolkit, the fundamentals of business, accounting, finance, marketing, et cetera, and we do that for you here. But to understand the broader context, really, if you're going to lead in the world and help try to create new systems, new models, new structures that will go about hopefully improving the state of the world, that requires something beyond that. And that requires things like our integrative modules, Go-To. That requires college dinners where, although an informal part of your experience at Oxford is where you'll be challenged and challenge individuals ranging from philosophers and engineers and scientists to talk about the issues of the day, but really trying to get you to think both very deeply about business, but also more broadly about the world within which business operates. I think the way I generally think about it is that probably half of your learning will take place in the classroom at Oxford, half of it will take place outside the classroom, because Oxford is this amazing ecosystem of individuals and ideas, and really a wonderful community. In fact, probably there's maybe a handful of communities in the world like that in terms of places of higher learning. And it's through that informal experience through education that I think will make as much of a difference for you as an Oxford MBA as the formal part of your education within the business school. Thinking about sort of, what are the type of leaders we're looking to develop? We're looking for responsible leaders. We're looking for entrepreneurial leaders, and we're looking for leaders who understand the nexus of business and society. We're also looking to work with you when you're here to understand leadership at the individual, team, organization, and systems level. We think that the combination of being responsible, entrepreneurial, understand the nexus of business and society, but also being able to lead across the spectrum is really important if we're going to develop leaders who are going to have an impact on the future of the world. I also think it's important when you think about impact in the private sector that, for example, this week we're celebrating, we have the Skoll World Forum, which is an amazing, wonderful thing we do as a school, and the School Center for Social Entrepreneurship is a big part of that, and that is important and that matters. But I think it's even perhaps more important to think about the private sector more broadly in that spectrum. So we need people from multinationals, looking to be consultants, working in finance, to come together as a community here at Oxford to then go out in the world and really drive that change that we need to see across that entire spectrum. I think that ways that we're going to be more effectively doing that next year. So one of the major changes, I suppose, is it sounds sort of simple on one level, but I think it's quite meaningful. We're restructuring the nature of the program for next year to do a couple things. Instead of delivering our courses over, say, an 8 to 10 week period, which is what we've been doing the last few years, and you have 3 terms at Oxford, Michaelmas, Hillary, and Trinity, as well as a summer period for the MBA program, we would deliver a lot of things over the course of, say, the entire Michaelmas term, but also adding a couple weeks on each end. Same with Hillary and same with Trinity. And we would do so in part because the way that the program was structured, that was the only way we could do it. And we've introduced lots of exciting things into the program in the last few years, and we've had to do our best to make it work with that system and that structure. So we've worked with the faculty over the last year to think about, is there a better way to go about structuring the program? And our goal there was, I guess, to do a few things. One was not to make it less challenging, but to reduce the complexity of the experience. Another was to integrate into the regular academic week opportunities to have the skills development that employers really think are important, that maybe fall outside some of the traditionally academic courses at Oxford, but are no less important for an MBA student. And then finally, to try to create a little bit more time to breathe and think, because so much of what makes the experience here wonderful is serendipity, things that happen outside the classroom, engaging with the broader Oxford community. And so the major way we're doing that is, I guess a simple way to describe it would be, we're pretty much breaking down each of the terms into 2 blocks, so 2 sort of 5-week modules. A regular Oxford term is 8 weeks. For the MBA program, we have 10 weeks. We have to extend it because there's a lot to cover in a 1-year MBA, so we have to really pack it in. But by breaking down the delivery of the program into these 2 modules per term, so Michaelmas 1, Michaelmas 2, Hillary 1, Hillary 2, and Trinity 1, Trinity 2, we're able to lessen the number of things running at any one given time. So instead of having 6 or 7 things you need to be focused on, we're able to reduce that to 3 or 4 things. What that means is that we're delivering our courses in a little bit more condensed fashion. So 4 weeks, the standard model would be 4 weeks of classes followed by a week for exams. But in doing so as well, and I'll spare you all the details, but we're able to create space in the regular Monday through Thursday day to bring in much of our talent development, career development work, particularly in Michaelmas term, which is a wonderful improvement because it allows us to accelerate that journey, which is important because in a 1-year program, really the day you set foot on campus, employers are here meeting with you, looking to interview you. And so this is, the new structure allows for that. But what the new structure also allows for us to do is to take lots of the really cool things we've introduced around the integrative modules, around GoTo, around EP, some of our talent development, and just to put it together, I think, in a much clearer to understand Oxford leadership frame. And so the way your year will progress, you'll arrive on campus, you'll have launch, which is sort of orientation, but then you'll dive into a week very much around leadership at the individual level. And then as you progress through the year, through organizational behavior, you'll be looking at leadership at the team and organizational level. Then you'll have at the systems level with GoTo, and then finally, in the second half of Hillary term, the entrepreneurship project, which is really design and delivery. So we're going to take you through that journey. Along the way, we're going to be able to integrate in the integrative module content around being a responsible business leader, around thinking entrepreneurially, around, through global rules of the game, understand the nexus of business and society. Currently, in the current structure, those things happen, but they don't happen, I think, in as nice a sequence. So we're able to really put that together in a manner that will be much easier to navigate, much easier to make sense of for our students. But then, as I mentioned too as well, we're shifting I haven't talked about this, but classes will be Monday through Thursdays. Fridays will be the co-curricular and talent development day. But within the Monday through Thursday, we're going to be able to introduce much of our sort of things like our consulting development program and other activities that currently we have to add on, do on the weekends, do in the evenings. But the new program structure allows us really to embed those in the academic week. Even though they're not for credit, they really do, I think, fit much better into the structure. And so this is a big thing. Probably the last thing about the new structure, which I think is exciting, is that currently we offer, I guess, to talk about, stepping back, I suppose, and talking about the way the year is structured. You take your core courses really in the first half of the year, then you do electives, and then in the summer term, which is July and August, you're able to either take an internship for credit, you're able to do a strategic consulting project, or if you'd like, you can take a couple electives staying in Oxford over the summer. You need to earn 2 units of credit over July and August. Because of the way that the Oxford calendar and our MBA calendar has been scheduled up until starting next year, you really can only, except in a few exceptional circumstances, start your internship for credit in July. Now, many of you may know that the way that the global MBA internship market is structured, many of the most desirable internships start in June. And with this new structure in Trinity term, the way we've done it with the modules, instead of having one Trinity term run from sort of the very end of April, beginning of May through the end of June, early July, by breaking the module into 2, we'll have a set of electives that will run from sort of over the month of May, late April through May, with an assessment at the end of May, and then a set of electives that will run through June, early July, which means if you have an internship for credit that starts in early June, you're able to actually leave and go do that during that June-July period, and then return to earn 1 last unit of credit you'd have to take 1 elective at the end of August through the module summer electives, and then overload in the first half of Trinity, because you would do normally 3 electives in the first half of Trinity and 3 electives in the second half of Trinity. But for those being able to do the internship for credit, you would do 4 electives in the first half of Trinity, 2 electives in the second half of Trinity, and then 1 more credit you need to earn in August to then earn your graduation before coming together as a cohort for capstone and for the end of course ceremony. So that's the overall structure. So basically, it'll be less things happening at once. There'll be more time in the schedule to think and breathe and reflect. We'll have a leadership journey that I think is better structured, taking you from the individual through the system through delivery. I think it's building upon lots of things we've already been putting together over the past years, but just delivering it in a better fashion. The internship for credit now can actually start in June if you'd like. It can also take place in July and August if that is better for you, but it brings lots of internships that aren't currently available to our MBAs, and I think these are all great improvements. Finally, in terms of new things we're introducing, so we've introduced a lot to the program over the last few years, and we're doing lots of exciting things. But probably the biggest new thing we're introducing is the Creative Destruction Lab. Now, the Creative Destruction Lab is something that existed, it was started, it still exists. It began at the University of Toronto's Rutland School of Business in 2012, and now there are CDLs in a variety of campuses in the world, but we will be the first European university to have the Creative Destruction Lab. And that is for seed stage companies coming out of universities, usually scientific based, but they connect venture capitalists with the companies and then MBA students to work with these companies to help advise them and work with them. Next year, we'll be running a pilot, which will engage 25 MBAs in that process. We'll have more details as the summer progresses, but I would encourage you to think about, if you're interested, to go to creativedestructionlab.com to learn more about that. I think I will now pause because that's a lot I've given you, and see if there are any questions, and then take it from there. So let's see, do we have any questions?
So we've had one question come through asking about the internship. So hopefully Ian's just answered a little bit about that with the new structure of how the internships will fit into the new Trinity term. Someone else has asked if there is a good chance to get into consulting and what our alumni network is looking like for people wanting to get into, the McKinseys, the Bains, the Boston Consulting groups.
Certainly. So yes. So I think on the internship question, I think hopefully I've addressed that, and I think there are internships that would be able to take into account. I do think it is worth stressing as well, though, that with a one-year MBA program, so we do have internships. I think that many of our students, though, choosing a one-year program do so because they kind of know where they want to go and don't necessarily need an internship to make a transition. And the consulting firms, so McKinsey, BCG, and Bain all recruit on our campus, and we do have success there every year. And they're mostly concerned about how you think. They're not necessarily concerned about whether you need an internship or not for them. They'll look at your background. They're going to look at things like your GMAT scores. They're going to look at your career progression. But then very much through the interview process, if they think that you've had a good career, they think you have a profile they like, and they think that you are sufficiently smart, which they often look at the GMAT, and they're looking for maybe a 700 plus GMAT, although there are exceptions. It's very much through their interview process, through their case studies, that they go about determine whether or not they think you're right for them. And in that process, one of the things that we've been able to now embed in the program starting next year is our consulting development program and the skills that we believe our MBAs need to be effective as consultants, which frankly we think anyone can value from that. So it's problem solving, it's communications, it's presentation skills, it's understanding how to crack cases. And so those are things that we'll be accelerating in Michaelmas term to get our MBAs ready for their interviews with consulting firms. And to also speak, beyond the big three, as it's called, McKinsey, BCG, and Bain, we also have EY, Deloitte, PwC, other consulting firms that do recruit on our campus as well. Any other questions? Let's see, coming through.
So in terms of what happens in September, so as Ian mentioned, we have a week which is called Capstone.
Yes.
Do you want to perhaps elaborate on how the kind of course wraps up and what Capstone entails?
Sure, yeah. So I think also maybe to just step back as well to think about the journey through the year, but then also the journey we're hoping to take you on. So one of the things you'll hear me talk about is that networking matters. It's important, and we're going to help you learn how to network when it comes to things like your career. But in terms of what we're trying to achieve as a business school is really to build community. And part of that is because if you want to go and sort of have an impact in the world, I think you do need a community to do so. And so we do view our students and our alumni and the broader sort of family at Oxford as a community. And part of being a community, I think, is both coming together at the beginning of the year, but also then, we want to have meaningful interactions and connection points. And I think that at the conclusion of the summer, when probably a little over half the class is in Oxford taking electives, but those electives are delivered in a fashion where not everyone is always here at the same time. Some of the class is off doing internships, and some of them are doing consulting projects. We do reconvene as a community in early September to celebrate the experience we've had together and to have really what is a graduation ceremony. Now, Oxford being Oxford, your official graduation happens through your college, and that happens the year afterward at different times of the year, depending on when your college comes up for graduation in Sheldonian. So it's kind of on a not rotating, but on a year every weekend there is our graduation happening. But for the MBA program, we do have a ceremony that is, for all intents and purposes, our graduation at the Sheldonian. We have we do a dinner the night before. People bring their friends and family, and we build a program a couple of days prior to the end of course ceremony that usually includes some sort of interesting content that friends and family are also able to attend. So it's, I think, a wonderful opportunity to say goodbye, to connect one last time as a group before you go out into the world, where no doubt you do stay in touch as a community, as alumni, but it is really does mark the end of a very important and transformational year for our students. So that's what happens at Capstone in September. Now, if for some reason you're not able to be there, we can work with you. We do encourage strongly that anyone is able to attend, but because there is no credit allocated for Capstone, at least as things currently stand, it isn't a requirement that you're here for that period of time. But generally everyone comes back because it is just a very important part of the experience, I think, in terms of transitioning out and making sense of the year that you had together.
So perhaps would you mind talking about some of the other initiatives going on at the moment? We've got the Skull World Forum, we've got a few things going on at the moment.
So yeah, so I guess I can talk a bit about just the co-curricular program in general, and then it's also just looking at the questions coming through, and I can take those. So there's one question about the Creative Destruction Lab with the early seed company. So this is a brand new thing that's just been announced. So I would suggest please go to the Creative Destruction Lab website to get a sense of what it is. But it's just early days, and it's run through our entrepreneurship center. So I, as MBA program director, collaborate with them, but do not own that. That's something I would encourage you to check out around the early stage companies. But we also have a lot of other exciting things happening in our co-curricular program around entrepreneurship. Within the curriculum itself, we have the entrepreneurship project. In the co-curricular, we have the entrepreneurship center and the foundry. The entrepreneurship center runs a program across the term that you'll learn more about, or across the year, which they do two things. They have one, each term there's a program they run that you apply for, and about 30 MBA students take part in, 30 to 40. They also, though, offer, like all of our co-curricular programs, general programming for the entire MBA population. The school center is similar, so they have an impact lab they run over the year, but they also then, which is around for 30 to 40 MBAs, but then which is you apply for, but then also there are other programs that they run for the general MBA population. The finance lab, similar, that's upwards to potentially even 80 MBAs take part in the finance lab. That runs mostly through Michaelmas term, perhaps a little bit into Hillary. But once again, we offer co-curricular programming that looks at issues around finance as well throughout the year, to name a few of our activities. The consulting development program is something that we make that available to everybody. That starts over the summer months. That's one thing also for careers to stress, that we kick off our career development program this early summer. That's delivered blended online over the summer months, and then we move into the in-person activities when you get to Oxford. But much of we really get a jump start because of the nature of the one-year program and really wanting to get you as ready as possible for those conversations with employers the day you set foot on campus. We do a lot with you over the summer months. There'll be more information about that coming soon. But then when you're here, we do a lot around talent development, skills development through our career development office, throughout a career development program, looking at the skills that we think employers really value in you, and that's a big part of the co-curricular as well. I think that addresses those, hopefully. And also, for any of these questions, if I'm not doing a good job, please email us, email the team, email me, and we can get back to you with a more detailed follow-up afterward. There's a question around someone who their sponsor, they need to be back at their home course at the end of June. So that their sponsored student needs to be back at their home company by the end of June. So that's, I'd say, a question to take offline. What I can say is that there are some ways to accelerate with really, if you have very good reasons to need to accelerate, we can talk to you about what that can look like in terms of accelerating to ensure that you've earned your required credits before the end of official Trinity term. So that's something that we can discuss. So there, generally the expectation is you're going to be here, you're going to be engaged with the program through the whole year, and that is what we expect. If you have a special situation, please reach out to us and we can address that on a case-by-case basis. And there are potentially ways we can make that work. Let's see some other questions coming through. There's a question about when you get your MBA degree. So you officially get your MBA degree in November, generally, and that's because the nature of Oxford, there's internal, I won't bore you with this, but there's a series of sort of bureaucratic things that occur before your degree is certified, and that happens in November. For all intents and purposes, you're done with the program when capstone concludes, and we are able to, we have on occasion, whenever required, communicated with anyone who needs to know if you've completed the program. We're able to share that, although the official transcript isn't really available to November, but we haven't had issues ever with students facing that as a problem.
In terms of, I guess, at the end of capstone as well, it is actually a really nice opportunity to get everyone from the cohort together and have almost an informal graduation ceremony, because then you do split off and have your individual graduation with your colleges. So it is a really nice way to kind of end the year all together, all dressed up in all your Oxford subflask, and have a really nice ceremony at the Sheldonian Theatre here in Oxford. So it's nice to get two ceremonies.
Yeah, no, it is lovely. And coming back for your college graduation, depending on where you are in the world, what you're up to might be tricky, but still worth doing. And it's just another wonderful Oxford experience. So question around the new curriculum. So it's not a new curriculum, it's a new structure. And we will reach out with you with just some explanation as to what that looks like, and with even an update on what the schedule will be. We can share that fairly soon. We're in the process of just working with the faculty to do the schedule, but we can certainly send something soon that's a high-level overview of the year for you, and you'll have access to the post admin portal, which you have access to, and we can post something there too. So that's no problem. And this is all just in the last sort of month been finalized with the faculty. That's why we're just sharing now. There was a question around doing a pre-MBA internship in a one-year program. I think that's great if you have the opportunity to do so. We don't currently have any structured way that we work with our admitted students to try to find pre-MBA internships. So that's something you would have to look at by yourself, but highly encourage that. I think that's a great idea. So if you have that as an opportunity, I think that's a wonderful thing to do. There was a question around the technology sector. So one of the things I neglected to mention around our co-curricular program, we do have a digital track that our career development program is working on for students looking to work in the digital space. Because technology, if you look at sort of our big, not only us, but MBAs in general, it's really finance consulting and tech companies are really the big three areas where people go work now. Speaking of technology, the way our career development office is organized, we have kind of someone who overlooks impact careers, even though that does cut across a variety of areas of types of jobs. We have someone who overlooks finance careers and their team, and each of these people have teams. We have someone in charge of our consulting careers, and then we have someone in charge of what we call general industry, but a big part of that is tech. And within that, the gentleman who heads that used to be Amazon's lead MBA recruiter for European MBA programs. So he used to actually go hire MBAs. And now a year and a half ago, probably now, we're lucky enough to get Tom Lawrence to join us and our team. And so he's a great asset as far as working with tech companies. And there's no shortage of other activities. And we have our sort of defined co-curricular programs, but almost anything you're interested in, Oxford as a university or we as a business school are doing something in it. We have a whole range of, Oxford Business Network, OBNs. There's one that looks at tech and entrepreneurship. We have student clubs. There's just no shortage of speakers, activities, and people on all of these things. So it is just an environment where there's really too much almost going on. It's a place where they talk about fear of missing out, FOMO, because there's so much happening. If you've chosen to do one thing, you're worried, did I choose the right thing? Generally, you have, and so people need to be comfortable in their decisions. But I think that it's just there's not enough hours in the day or the week or the month. Really, there's just so much to do in Oxford. Trying to see other questions. There was I think for the opportunities in the social impact sector, we do have one of our career development office, the way we're organized, Impact Careers is one of those. And yes, we do have, we do well in that space. Let's see, some other questions.
One question quite specific about if you're being interviewed for the Skoll Scholarship, how do you manage your the 3rd of May deadline for the tuition fee? We appreciate that you have to wait.
Yeah, so there's an extent, yeah. So if there's any scholarships you're waiting on and you have a deposit deadline, we are happy. We should do it almost automatically, but just let us know, and we're happy to wait until you've received your decision to then decide whether or not you want to go ahead and join us. We fully understand that with the deposit, so that's no problem.
Thank you for your patience while we just read through the tiny font of the questions. So we've got someone who's been accepted onto the course who's already here doing a master's.
Mm-hmm.
What opportunities are there to kind of, I guess, familiarize with the MBA prior to starting if someone's already in Oxford?
So that's a good question. So, and in fact, we sort of should. So we do have a number of students who apply to the 1+1. So for those of you who don't maybe know, the 1+1 is where you apply to Oxford to both a master's program and the MBA in the same year when you apply, and then you come and do your master's, MSc, MPP, whatever, and then the second year you're in Oxford to do the MBA. So we do have a series of programs we run over the course of over the year for the 1+1 community, and so anyone now who we know is going to be joining us next year in the MBA program who is only applied to the MBA this year, we should just start feeding into those 1+1 activities. So that's a good question and a note to us to do that to make sure we make that addition. Specifically, we actually are going to have, I think it's on May 2nd, a session for people in the first year of the 1+1 program with our career office. So we'll be doing a lunch here and a workshop on careers for the 1+1s. So we're in their first year of the program. So we'll be sure if any of you, so both the person who asked this question, but then also anybody else who is on the call or the webinar who may have just now, having just been admitted to the MBA program, become a member of the 1+1 community. We'll get them plugged into that as well. So that's a good question. So thank you.
And even throughout the year, there's quite a few various like scholars breakfasts or things that some 1+1 people get involved in, and there are quite a few opportunities throughout the year once you have your MBA offer. You can get to know current 1+1 students or outgoing 1+1 students. So yeah, we'll definitely keep you in the loop with those.
Yeah, which is great. Sorry, we're just looking at our questions here to make sure we're addressing them for. There was one question around if don't get any of these labs that you apply for, but interested in social impact, what can I do? So, so the consulting development program, everyone can participate in, so that's not an issue. The finance lab or some of the entrepreneurship specific programming or the Skoll Impact Lab, there is still a whole set of activities that we offer for all those for students who aren't in maybe one of these formal co-curricular programs. So the co-curricular program is vast, so there is plenty of opportunity to engage. So I wouldn't be too concerned it's great if you get in one of those programs. It's also a trade-off though, because if you're in one of those programs, that's a lot of time to one of those specific things that then means you can't do some other things. So in fact, it's really not the end of the world if you don't get admitted into one of those programs. I think there's actually, in some ways, it's almost just as good. They're great programs, but there's really so much to do at Oxford. It's not. You'll still have a wonderful experience. So it's nothing to be too concerned about, I would say.
We've got a couple of questions left. If anyone else is thinking of anything they want to send through, please do. We've got someone asking about how difficult it would be to get a job in the UK when they're when they're a non-European candidate. That one, it is tricky because it really does depend the sector, your experience. There's no kind of yes or no. Yes, it'll be really easy. No, it'll be really difficult. It's we don't really have issues.
Yeah, I think historically, with if you look at our employment outcomes, so historically, and actually just one of the things I don't think I talked sufficiently about earlier is just part of what makes us distinct is just how diverse we are, not just geographically, but also in terms of backgrounds and interests. We have an incredibly rich and diverse group of people who come here. When you look at the geographic distribution, historically, somewhere between 7-8% of our students are from the UK, and then another 7-9% are from broader Europe. So that's 15, 16, 17%, but around half of our graduates end up working in the UK or the EU. So a lot of people not from the UK or the EU have earned jobs in the UK and EU. So there are lots of companies that do sponsor. It is also worth, I suppose, just talking about Brexit while we're all on that topic, which is something that we currently are not. We're a global university. We think in global terms. We have a very global student body. I think Brexit, it connects more for me to bigger concerns around just the broader geopolitical situation as well as the broader global economy, and what's happening in I'm from the United States, and I think there's complicated things happening there. There's a lot of things happening in the world that could impact the broader sort of geopolitical or global economic picture that could impact all MBAs in the world. I think Brexit itself is a piece of that, but I think it would take more to disrupt our prospective career outcomes for our students. I do think that in an odd way, we might even lead. There may be more opportunity for MBAs in the UK than currently exist, only because if Brexit happens, it's still not even. We're not sure it will happen. If it does happen, it may not happen in a year's time. It's still a lot of uncertainty, but there will be a need for highly skilled labor in this country. And so I think you could potentially see an outcome where there's actually 4 people who, say, for example, earn an MBA at a place like Oxford, might actually have a more lax hurdle to clear to get a work visa in the UK. And London will still be London. It may be changed, but it's still a global capital. So I think that there's a scenario where, in fact, for an MBA, it might even become a little bit easier to get a job in London than it currently is if Brexit does happen. But historically, about half of our graduates have worked in the EU or the UK, and we anticipate that to be the case. So it really comes down to your background and the individual company and whether or not they sponsor students.
We've got a question about maybe the technology career track that was mentioned earlier.
So this is the digital career path, which it's something that, so in the digital space, it's something that's being developed and new, and so I don't have a huge amount of, but I think the emphasis and idea is what are the skills that our students need to develop to make them more appealing to tech employers. So it's pretty, that's, I guess, the high level, the way I look at it. Yes.
In terms of it being in place for this year's incoming class, so the digital marketing pathway is already in place.
Yes.
And they're looking at adding a second pathway.
Yeah.
Do you know if that's?
I believe this all should be up and running in, but we'll have
double check on
a series of updates for you before May. Next few weeks as you're having to lead up to your decision, and certainly if you're not getting a sufficient answer from us, please reach out to us and ask these questions, which is good. There's a question around corporate recruiters. So we do have, I think generally with MBA programs, the main companies tend to recruit for the region because they're global companies, but they tend to go to the business schools in their region for their regional needs. So, that's why half of our students end up in EU or Britain, I suppose, because of the way that kind of works. So, if you're really, really solely focused on trying to work in, say, a certain part of the world that isn't Europe, it's still very possible, and we send lots of people to the US and to Asia, to Africa, et cetera. But in terms of the companies recruiting on campus, you will see that, but I think that in particularly, I think maybe Asia more than, say, the US, just because when you look at, there's no shortage of business schools in the US, and so companies recruiting in the US often go to US business schools for that, whereas we're probably more global, probably everything but the US in some sense. With that said, the major consulting firms, the way that system works, you actually list your preferred locations, and that can be anywhere in the world. You do your first round interviews at your school, so wherever you are in the world as a business school student, and then if you're successful through that, you then go to the practice in the world, and so it doesn't really matter where you are based in terms of consulting careers in that regard. But I'd say for general industry, for finance, et cetera, I would say we're good globally. If you're really focused on the United States, I would say probably a U.S. business school might make more sense. With that said, we send lots of people. Probably 20% of our graduates end up working in the United States, so it does. It's not unusual.
We've got quite a couple of specific questions about careers, which we might follow up with you individually offline. But we do have one question asking if we can provide a bit more detail on the career development work that can be done over summer.
Sure. Yeah. So it's it's a series of it's an online program. Some of it's delivered synchronously, some asynchronously, mostly asynchronous, which means you can take it on your time. But the main goals are really to get you up to speed on things like having your CV ready, having a bit of an understanding of where you're looking to go in terms of the course of the year, because that's really one of my major points to stress is that with a one-year program, it's really good to do your homework before you arrive to know what you want to get out of the year to help you get where you want to go, because the year goes fast. And if you are looking to make changes to your career, the more you can do before you arrive to help position yourself for that, the better in terms of networking and in terms of developing and positioning your CV. Those sorts of things are key. So it's really around some of the basic things we want you to understand around career development to get you ready for hitting the ground running when you arrive on campus with some of our more hands-on, in-person talent and career development activities, as well as being able, being ready to go to discuss, with employers what you're hoping to get out of the MBA and where you want to head.
And so we've had a question saying that we've mentioned finance careers quite a bit in the finance lab, and that we've got a dedicated finance representative in the careers team. Is there a specific program for people who want to pursue careers in venture capital and private equity? So we do have electives, So we have a number of electives. We have the Foundry, the Entrepreneurship Center, a number of things that they, the Creative Constructive Lab. So there are things we offer to help students prepare for those careers. Those are incredibly hard places to get jobs anywhere in the world, not just here. I would say that to stress, and that
private equity and VC firms, they don't traditionally recruit in the same manner that banks do at business schools. So we do have people who get placed in those places, and we work with you on that. But we do run a number of electives and co-curricular programming in that space as well. We have a wonderful private equity initiative institute here at Oxford, and some faculty who are just leaders in the space. Through the finance lab, there's actually a lot of private equity connected to that in terms of the firms that come through it. So that's a piece of it as well. VC, a little bit different, I think, as far as traditional post-MBA careers, but we do, through all the things we do in the entrepreneurship space, do offer programs that do assist you in that area. Let's see, any other questions we haven't addressed yet? So there's a question about if you want to get a job in the UK, you have to sort of start engaged your courage, the moment you arrive on campus. So I just say in general, if you're looking in a one-year MBA program, wherever you are in the world, if you're looking to have a job and earn a job during the course of the year, you really do have to focus on that from the get-go and even before you arrive on campus. And that's independent of where you want to have a job. I think that's just something that is important. I think that, something I'd like to stress is trying to be as disciplined and as structured as possible, so you create space in your week to do that, but also make sure that you save time to engage in the program, to engage in your classes, to engage in things like college dinners, engage in the co-curricular program. So I think, but it does, if you are really focused on that, it does require you from really before you arrive thinking about that. In the career development, you'll be hearing more from them soon around the plans for the summer, but also the plans for the year. And that's the case at any one-year MBA program.
Yeah, I think the most important thing is to enjoy the year. I think don't arrive on day one and stress that you haven't got a job on day two. I think really do enjoy the MBA year, enjoy getting to know your classmates, enjoy your colleges, enjoy all the experiences in Oxford.
Yeah, and it does work out, right? So that's the thing. I mean, everybody, there's a lot of people that get stressed, but it does work out. Our MBAs do well. We'll have there is a bit of a lag, and I apologize, because the nature of reporting, in terms of, because our as graduates of Oxford, you're certified in November. So the official recruiting deadline or reporting deadline for our graduates to report to us their employment outcomes is 3 months after that. So that's January, February. So December, January, February, and then in March, we sort of chase people down. So I think in the next week or two, we'll have the class of 17-18's employment report, the current employment report from the class of 16-17. 91% of the graduates had jobs sort of by that February period. I think it'll be probably similar with this group, so it does work out. So it's not anything to worry about too much. But if you're very focused on making sure you have the job the day you graduate, you do need to spend some time on it. But I do think Sam's point is an important one, and you really also, I think this is very much about, it's expensive, it's a big investment to do this program, but it's something you're looking at for your lives, right? You're joining a community for life. You'll have a wonderful experience during your year here. You'll have probably a very cool job afterward, but this is actually something for the long haul, both for your career for the long haul, but also your personal network and just life experience. I mean, I think it's really great to have a network or a community of 60-some nationalities around the world that you can just engage with on a personal level, not even professional level, that will serve you well. And that's not to mention even the broader Oxford community you become a part of too.
So thank you, everyone. I think we'll take maybe one or two last questions. There are a lot of questions about careers. We might actually look at roping careers into do.
Careers will be connecting with you both. Just formally, we'll try to maybe schedule something with careers to very soon to reach out to everybody to talk in more detail about these questions, because careers, once again, like the Entrepreneurship Center, I work very closely with careers, but they themselves serve the schools. The MBAs are about 90% of their work, but so it's a team of 17 people or so that we've grown over the last 2 years. They've brought a lot new online. They've really increased the numbers of companies recruiting on campus, but it is something that they are their own. They support us, work with us. So I think that we'll look to have them have a webinar with you soon to talk in more detail about these things. But then within that as well, I guess there's a couple questions around both entrepreneurship resources as well as social impact careers. Maybe I'll just talk about those two, pause and see if there's any other questions, and then we'll wrap up. So for entrepreneurship, in the very short period of time, we have just a really robust program. So if you are just going to go through the MBA, you're going to be involved in both the content that we put forward through our integrative module around entrepreneurship, which is very much around thinking entrepreneurially. So that's something where we want you to think about if you do work, whether you're looking to start your own organization, but also maybe probably for more of you, it's how even within an organization do you think about driving change. Every MBA is involved in the entrepreneurship project, which is where you as a small team work together on a new business idea. We have the Entrepreneurship Center, and each term offers a pretty substantial amount of programming to help you, whether it's develop an idea, work an idea, etc. We have the Seed Fund, which is a student-led initiative that does have some funding available that does reward MBA and other Oxford University startup ideas. We have the Oxford Foundry, which is, although it's run by the business school, it's university-wide, and this is another initiative university-wide that has an accelerator program and a bunch of other things they do through the year to connect with where it's kind of, the wonderful sweet spot where we get business school students engaging with students from across the university to come together and collaborate on business ideas, where you get that range of experience and backgrounds that we think is sort of the special sauce for bringing these ventures into the world. We now have the Creative Destructive Lab. So all these things add up, I think, to this really robust ecosystem for entrepreneurship at Oxford around the funding side, the skills and workshops you need to develop an idea, to the mentorship, et cetera. So you'll find, I think we rival anyone in terms of finding these resources. In terms of impact careers, so we send people, depends how you define impact, so we certainly send people to traditional places in the impact space, like your Dahlbergs. We send people into impact investing. We send people to things like the World Bank, the IFC. We have people working very much in startup context, in developing country context, looking to have impact. We're increasingly hoping to have more people work at large multinationals, but doing so with the impact, when they're looking at things like sustainability. So we do that. It is worth stressing that impact careers, it's very challenging. Because I think there's an assumption among certain students that if you want to do good, that's something, there's no shortage. But in fact, it's probably as hard to get a job in impact consulting as it is to get a job at McKinsey. It's as hard to get a job in impact investing as it is at Goldman Sachs. So it's definitely a hyper-competitive space, but one where we do a nice job, and we do have a good resource and a good network to help our students try to get careers in that space. I think my overarching goal is for our program is not to necessarily think that we need people in impact careers, but we need people in careers who are thinking about impact. And if I put my very sort of idealistic hat on, we desire to have our MBA serve the world, serve society, but they're by and large going to do that through their employer, and we want those to be influential employers. And so it is really looking for people to have what would maybe be traditional MBA outcomes, but bring a perspective to that employer that does get them thinking a bit differently about potential and the opportunity that exists in those large firms to try to improve things and put together a system that works better for more people. So it's, for me, not so much being an impact person or not, it's actually putting people out in the world who have a different point of view that are going to try to drive change in these large existing organizations, along with people being social entrepreneurs, along with people going into impact investing, along with people going into impact consulting. I think we need to do all those things if we're going to actually get to where we want to go as a school. But yeah. So I think that probably, any final questions? Or are we good, do you think? There's a question around criteria for the impact lab, and that's really, that's something the Skoll Center works on that, and it's, I think, generally looking for people that they think they can add the most value to in terms of where they're looking to go, and that's generally, I think, the same frame we use for the MBA program. We as an MBA program are pretty, we're not too bothered about what someone wants to do after the MBA, which is why we do, I think, attract a range of diverse people in our program, but we want to ensure that we are the right program to help that individual get there. So I think similarly with, say, the Impact Lab and the Skoll Center, thinking through a similar lens, are we able to help through the Impact Lab to help an individual achieve the goal they're looking to achieve through this program? And so that would be, I think, an important thing in terms of the Impact Lab. And they use a variety of criteria to determine whether they think that's the case. And then I think I've addressed pretty much all the questions. So with that, I just want to, thank you guys very much. Thank all of you for taking the time to hear from me today. I do encourage you to follow up in detail and specifically with us for any questions that I didn't either answer sufficiently for you or any questions that you have afterward that maybe come up. I do think this is an amazing, wonderful place. I think that an MBA is a great degree, a great experience for anyone to have for their career, but I think having an MBA at Oxford really raises the bar because you're joining a community that not only wants to succeed in terms of careers and succeed in terms of financial, but to do so in a manner that does challenge a bit more. We do ask more of our students to think about how can we lead in the world? How can we really leverage the private sector to be a force for good? And I think that doing that requires MBAs that are a bit more sophisticated. So understanding the kind of transitional environment, the MBA toolkit, but taking it to that broader contextual environment, really understand that nexus of business and society. And we do that, both through our curriculum, we do that more broadly also though through the co-curricular experience as well as just being in Oxford and all that Oxford offers. So with that, thank you so much. And I very much hope to welcome you all here to Oxford in September. So thank you. Either have a great night, a good rest of your day, or a good day, and we look forward to staying in touch. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. I'll send the recording around, and what I'll do as well is I'll send through some recent webinar recordings from student panels, and there's a little bit of information as well of how they've found the course so far, how they've found the job search. In particular, I think there was a couple of questions about private equity, and I know that that's definitely addressed in the student panel we had with students from the Middle East and North Africa. So I'll send those around. But if you do need to follow up with us about any of the questions you've asked today, or if you have any more questions, I'm just popping our email address in the chat. Please do get in touch with us, and we look forward to seeing you in September. Thank you, everyone.